Hello, we're back. So yeah, I wanna dive in here a little bit to my final thoughts on Midsummer Night's Dream. Kind of finish up our conversation there. Um, the previous video, I kind of walked through some of the expectations for the ninth week of the semester and showed you a sample of the annotated bibliography. In the second video, I want to kind of return to some themes and questions that I'm kind of posing here at the end of the play. So at the end of Act 4 in Midsummer Night's Dream, we finally see kind of everything work itself out in a way. Um, Theseus and Hippolyta are actually walking through the woods when they kind of come across the lovers who have all been sleeping in the woods. Demetrius, when he wakes up, the love potion is he's still under the effect of the love potion, and sees Helena, so they're in love together, and Lysander and Hermia are finally together, and the whole thing kind of gets dismissed. So that Aegeus and Theseus, it just kind of goes away, and Bottom, also turns back into a man, and you get a sense that the conflict between Oberon and Titania is also over, even though it may have been problematically resolved in the same way that Demetrius, his situation with Helena and Hermia is kind of problematically resolved because he's more or less he's still under the influence of this powerful potion, right? But this is to kind of go back here a little bit. Theseus says, how come this gentle concord in the world, that hatred is so far from jealousy, to sleep by hate and fear no enmity? And Lysander just says, I just woke up and it kind of feels like everything is a dream. Our intent was to be gone from Athens, where we might, without the peril of the Athenian law. And Aegeus also sort of chimes in here and says, I still want justice, right? I still want Demetrius to marry Helena, or I'm sorry, Hermia, his daughter. I beg the law upon his head. They would have stolen away, right? They broke the law. They would have defeated you and me. You and your wife and me of my consent. You of your wife and me of my consent. Of my consent that she should be your wife. But then Demetrius kind of steps in and says, well, actually, I want to marry Helena now. And Theseus says, Aegeus, I will overbear your will. Basically, I'm overriding your authority here, and I get the final say because I'm the guy in charge. And then they all kind of walk off back to Athens from the woods. So things have been kind of tied up. It's Shakespeare, so it's not a neat little bow. But one of the questions I have here is, we kind of talked last week about, or when we were talking about this play, that in the woods it's kind of this space of like confusion and topsy-turvydom, and Athens is kind of this place where laws exist and there's this hierarchy where men are kind of calling the shots, and it's like this very patriarchal rule in place. So there is, again, this is a Shakespearean comedy, so there is a kind of return to the status quo when everybody goes back to Athens. It seems like the men are in charge again. It seems like everybody is kind of okay now with the way things have turned out. But let's look at how this fifth act starts. Hippolyta says, I've been listening to the story that these lovers in the woods have been saying, and it's strange, my Theseus, that these lovers speak of, right? And Theseus says, more strange than true. I never may believe these antique fables, nor these fairy toys. So again, this is kind of an imposition of rationalism being foregrounded in this play. And he goes off on this rant about lovers and madmen, and poets. The lunatic, the lover, and the poet are of imagination all compact, right? But at the same time, what I find interesting about this is that Theseus, he's kind of promoting this Athenian rationalism. But then further along in this scene, a big question for me comes up, which is it almost seems like Theseus is kind of acting irrationally in his choice of which play he wants to hear. Because again, the fifth act here, the weddings have all taken place. Um, Hermia has married Lysander, Helena has married Demetrius, and Theseus has married Hippolyta. And they decide, we want to hear a play, and a few options are presented to them. And if we go here, a play there is, my lord. Let's just take a look at this. Philostrati comes in, he's the one kind of presenting, or Theseus reads off this list of, the potential plays that they could hear. And Philostrati says, there's this one other play you might want to consider, some 10 words long, which is as brief as I have known a play. But by 10 words, my lord, it is too long, which makes it tedious, for in all the play there is not one word apt, one player fitted, right? The players putting on this play don't know what the hell they're doing, and the language itself is so confusing that you'll never kind of make sense of it. But Theseus is intrigued. He says, "What are they that do play it?" And Philostrati says, "Oh, they're not actors. They're hard-handed men that work in Athens here, which never labored in their minds till now." Right? They absolutely have no idea what they're doing on the stage. And now have toiled their unbreathed memories with the same play against your nuptial. And Theseus, again, seeming to kind of combat reason here, says, "You know what? I'd like to hear that play." And Philostrati even protests, saying, "No, my noble lord, it is not for you. I have heard it over, and it is nothing in the world, unless you can find sport in their intents, extremely stretched and conned with cruel pain to do your service." And this is, I think, is interesting, because he's saying that when you watch a performance, are you supposed to kind of pay attention to what the actors are able to show you, or are you supposed to kind of give them the benefit of the doubt and pay attention to what the actors are intending to do? And Theseus says, "I will hear that play, for never anything can be amiss when simpleness and duty tender it." So Theseus's answer here is more or less, if their intentions are good, that's what should count, right? And then this conversation, he goes and gets the players, and Hippolyta kind of jumps in, and she says, "I love not to see wretchedness o'ercharged, and duty in his service perishing." And Theseus says, "You shall see no such thing," right? You're not going to see some kind of bad attempt here. And she pushes him a little bit, and then he goes on to justify like his decision, like why he wants to see this play. And he says, "The kinder we to give them thanks for nothing," right? If all we see is just a bunch of men like trying to put on a play and thinking that they're these great actors, we're the ones who are really like the audience we're the ones who are doing a kind thing here, right? Our sport shall be to take what they mistake, and our poor duty, and what poor duty cannot do, noble respect takes it in might, not merit. Where I have come, great clerks have purposed to greet me with premeditated welcomes, where I have seen them shiver and look pale, make periods in the midst of sentences, throttle their practiced accents in their fears, and in conclusion dumbly have broke off, not paying me a welcome. Trust me, sweet, out of this silence yet I picked a welcome, and in that modesty of fearful duty I read as much as from their rattling tongue of saucy and audacious eloquence. Love, therefore, and tongue-tied simplicity in the least speak most to my capacity. So what he's saying here is basically that, he has encountered people who have been so kind of tongue-tied and flabbergasted in his presence that all they did was kind of embarrass themselves in front of him. But it was up to him to kind of understand that their intent is what he wanted to focus on. It was up to him to kind of pick a welcome out of their attempt to welcome him, right? And And again, my question here about Theseus is why is Shakespeare kind of presenting us with this ruler sort of going so far as to make a whole argument about why seeing this play is worth our time. Um, on the one hand, it suggests that maybe there is a little bit more like confusion still going on here in Athens, where he's supposed to be this rational character. On the other hand, maybe this is sort of signaling that Theseus is a little bit crazy himself, and maybe suggests that he might even be a bad ruler. What is his justification reveal about what kind of ruler he is? Maybe he's a bad ruler, because he sort of thinks it's his job to kind of understand what people intend, right, in a performance, whether it being like meeting somebody, seeing a play, or ruling the kingdom, ruling Athens. Or the other thing going on here is Shakespeare is kind of telling his audience how they should be looking at the play that he is putting on, not necessarily the play within the play, but the play itself, Midsummer Night's Dream, right? It's almost like he's signaling to the audience, like, even if you don't like what you're seeing here, you need to give us the benefit of the doubt, kind of meet us halfway at least. This is kind of the equivalent of like watching a B movie, a B horror movie. And like, it's going to be bad going into it, but there's still a little curiosity, right? You still want to see a part of it. And a final question I have that relates to this is also, how does the play within the play relate to or comment on the play's other plots between Hermia, Lysander, Helena, Demetrius, and or Oberon, Titania? And I'd encourage you, on our Blackboard page, I posted a video, MND Act 5, which is part of the film that I wanted to show you in class during this week. But it kind of shows Sam Rockwell is one of the players. And again, the idea here in the play within the play is that these actors don't know what they're doing. They have no idea how to put on a play, and they're putting on this tragedy of Pyramus and Thisbe, but they're doing such a bad job of it that it's actually funny. And to give you an example of that, further down when the prologue, this is kind of like really, I think, very clever Shakespeare with his punctuation. He doesn't always tell an actor necessarily how they should deliver their line or where to stop with punctuation. But here he's doing it deliberately because he wants this to be a bad performance, right? So the prologue enters and says this: "If we offend, it is with our good will. That you should think we come not to offend, but with good will. To show our simple skill, that is the true beginning of our end. Consider then we come but in despite. We do not come as minding to contend you, our true intent is. All for your delight we are not here. That you should here repent you, the actors are at hand, and by their show you shall know all that you are like to know." Now again, you could read through this and figure out where the pauses are actually supposed to come, right? He's not supposed to stop right here in the middle of this sentence. With good will to show our simple skill, that in the true beginning, that is the true beginning of our end. Right? He's not supposed to say our true intent is, and then stop. He's supposed to say our true intent is all for your delight. We are not here that you should repent you, right? So the punctuation here is deliberately telling the actor to kind of do a bad job with this. And Theseus and Lysander and Hippolyta all comment on this, right? Theseus says, "This fellow doth not stand upon points. He hath rid his prologue like a rough colt," right? He delivered that speech like he was riding on a horse that he had no control over. He knows not the stop. A good moral, my lord. It is not enough to speak, but to speak true. And Hippolyta kind of agrees. Indeed, he hath played on the prologue like a child on a recorder. But again, Theseus is willing to meet the actors halfway and to give them the benefit of the doubt. He says, his speech was like a tangled chain, nothing impaired but all disordered. Right? So even though there was confusion here, there was nothing impaired. Like no harm was done in all the confusion.